For decades, literally for decades, the dialogue between the Coptic Church and the Catholic Church is the best it's been in centuries. Pope Kyrillos himself came out and said this, that our communication and our dialogue and our ecumenism has reached the highest point it's been in centuries. We were doing great getting along with one another. The Catholic Church recognized the 21 Coptic martyrs as martyrs. There has been an exchange of young priests and monks between different programs. And there was this climax of ecumenism when Pope Francis and Pope Tewodros got together and established a literal day of friendship between the Catholic Church and the Coptic Church. But it all came crumbling down because in December of 2023, Pope Francis approved of a decree to allow blessings for same-sex couples in the Catholic Church. And when the Coptic Synod got news of this, they said, nope. Absolutely not. We are not allowing blessings for sins. Rightfully so. But you've heard the news. We've all heard the news. There's a new pope heading the papacy over at the Catholic Church, Pope Leo XIV. So is there hope? Can we resume dialogue? Will we see a reunion of the Coptic Church and the Catholic Church in our lifetimes? And I really don't envy Catholic clergy. I don't envy Catholic leadership because the Catholic Church is so widespread and so global that any time they make a decision, since there's so many differing types of Catholics and opinions amongst Catholics, some people are going to be mad, some people are going to be happy, especially because the Catholic Church is so prominent in the West, and the West is a lot more liberal than most other places in the world, definitely more than Africa, the Middle East, Asia. It's really hard to wrangle in these sheep. If the shepherds of their church have to deal with black sheep and white sheep and purple-haired, or rather purple-wooled sheep, or blue-haired, or rather blue-wooled sheep, it's hard to kind of keep track of all of your sheep, man. They're running around all over the place, and there's so many different types. And so I understand the idea behind trying to bless same-sex marriages. You don't want the blue-haired sheep to run away, the blue-wooled sheep to run away and never come to church again. You're trying to wrangle them in. You're trying to stop the bleeding of your congregation. I get it. But to take that step and allow blessings for sin, blatant sin, is obviously crossing a line. We're called to love the sinner and hate the sin. Nothing wrong with that. The church is a hospital. If someone who has these tendencies wants to come to church, we ought to be accepting, we ought to be loving, but we ought to rebuke the sin itself. That is unacceptable. But that's what happened. And so the Coptic Synod said, no, we're going to stop talking. Because of this, they were shook. And it's not like the Coptic Church isn't global. We have churches in Japan, in Mexico, in South America. We have churches all over the place. But still, till this day, most of these churches still have a strong undercurrent of Egyptian culture in them. It hasn't become so culturally diverse yet, that we have to deal with this unfortunate problem that the Catholic clergy have to deal with. But I fear that we might be heading in that direction because just from my own observations, I take a look at the millennials. I'm really an older Gen Z. Surprise. But the millennials, right? The millennials, they got really liberal. They got really into a lot of the liberal movements. I want to name them for this video, but I'm worried that YouTube won't like it if I name some of these things. But just from my observation, Coptic people in America of the millennial variety have gotten really liberal. And the same is true for Gen Z women. But Gen Z men, that's where my hope is. Y'all Gen Z men in your 20s, I'm also in my 20s for now. But all of y'all Gen Zs are a lot more conservative, the men, on average, than the millennials. And I think the reason why that was is because I think a lot of the Gen Zs, they saw their siblings, they saw their uncles and their aunts being single cat ladies or miserable in other ways or having broken family structures. And so they saw that and they said, I don't want to be like that. I'm going to be traditional. I'm going to go to church. I'm not going to fornicate. I'm not going to be engaged with dyeing my hair all of the colors of the rainbow, which is good. But I've still seen that general trend towards liberalism. I hope that stops. And I would love nothing more than unity for these churches. I would love for the Coptic Church and the Catholic Church to reunite. The reason why is because I personally have such a strong connection to the Western canon, born in America. The only language I'm fluent in is English. So I've read the canon. I like to read. I'm a nerd. I've read Plato. I've read Aristotle, Shakespeare, Machiavelli, Tolstoy, Chesterton, Tolkien. I have a fondness for the Western canon. And it's mine ethnically as much as it is nationally, because Egypt, classical Egypt of antiquity, was really close to classical Greek antiquity. And the whole Western corpus is really built off of the classical Greeks. It all really started with the Socratics, arguably the pre-Socratics and Homer and all this, but really the Socratics. And there was dialogue even between Plato. Plato had some influences from Egypt because of Solon in the dialogues. And you had the School of Alexandria, which is heavily Aristotelian. And the Alexandrian church fathers were Greek fathers, not because they were ethnically Greek, they were ethnically Egyptian, but they wrote in Greek and they spoke in Greek and they interfaced with the Greek world. And of course, Egypt was part of the Roman Empire, and it was the breadbasket of the Roman Empire. And so if this was the place from which the Western classical tradition really began, then it's my tradition, ethnically, as much as it is nationally. And I love it. And a lot of it is great. I love the Western canon. And so if the most traditional Western church, that being the Catholic Church, can reunite, that means I have more options for friends. When I was growing up as a kid, I grew up in a situation where my parents were most comfortable with me hanging out with other kids whose parents that my parents knew. And that almost always meant it was going to be other Coptic kids. But there ain't that many Coptic kids around, especially when I was growing up. So I had like 5 options for friends. And I'm kind of eccentric. And so when you have 5 options for friends, you don't really have enough variety to select from people who you would have more in common with. There's going to be less things you have in common, which makes it harder to form a friendship. But the Catholic Church, being as big as it is, and as widespread as it is, it literally just gives me more options to interface with more different types of people at church, to find people who might have more niche interests similar to what I have. It's totally pragmatic for me. And of course, you'd be able to go to different churches. A lot of Coptic churches are spread out. Maybe there's one that's 30 minutes away, one that's 3 hours away. But imagine if there were 10 within a 5-mile radius. Wouldn't that be amazing? And many times I hear about stories where cops are in a situation where it would be most convenient for them to take communion at a Catholic church. And they absolutely should not do that, because that's totally prohibited. We are not in communion. We cannot take sacraments at the Catholic Church. But if the churches were united, then of course we would be able to. So I'd love for this to happen. Now, let's discuss Leo, the new Pope Leo XIV. Before he became Pope, he said on the topic of the same-sex blessings for the couples that Francis put in, he said that the application of this decree really depends on culture, where it might not make sense for this decree to be implemented in Africa, but it might make sense somewhere else in America, for example. So that's kind of a bad sign. That's not looking too hot that he's allowing it at all. This relativism is not good. And let's just say, hypothetically, we were able to get past all of this same-sex couple stuff. We still have a different Christology. We still have different papal authorities or different ideas about papal authority, different liturgical practices, and the dialogue that's been going so well has been going so well for about 50 years now. Okay, so these things take a long time. So even if somehow we were able to resume dialogue with Pope Leo and we were able to get past the same-sex couple blessing stuff, we would still be in the precarious situation that we were in before, where we have to deal with Christology and we have to deal with papal authority and on and on and on. And that's going to take a long time. So the hope that there will be a reunion in my life, unfortunately, isn't really there. It's possible. All things are possible through God. But I really don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. But the best we can do is plant the seeds under which the shade we will never sit and have maybe the future generations reap the fruits of our attempts to reunite. I would love it. I really would. And I'm sure a lot of other people would love it too, both Catholics and Coptics. And so in the meantime, what I think we can do is on a local level, where Coptics and Catholics kind of coexist, we can be friendly. We can share courses maybe on marriage or motherhood and allow attendance from both sides. We could maybe share in community service projects. We can maybe share in festivities or building use. And in doing that, we can kind of build the friendliness that might then one day lead to an actual union.